I myself, I don't speak Arabic. I don't have a cultural background. I'm no Muslim. I don't speak Russian, so I have to ask what it's about. And I have to. This is the other thing. Like youngsters, I think like when we see a narrative, I think it's far more interesting why this narrative is interesting or exciting for youngsters than the narrative itself. And I think this is like form of the problem that most monitoring is like very straight in the narratives, in the symbols and stuff. But what does this mean to youngsters? Why do they think this is exciting? I think this is the should be the main focus, and so I'm very critical against position to research or to monitoring without people who speak those languages, for instance. So like I give you one example why it's so important to work with youngsters, with people former or in the extremist scenes. You remember the attack on Samuel Paty 2020? With youngsters of mine, they spoke Russian, and they found in I think it took them 1 hour to find the original video from the Abdullah was his name, who was the attacker, who sent the head of Samuel Paty, the photo and a voice notice to an Instagram page. The Instagram page published it. In like 5 hours, there were over 600 comments. And we screenshotted it, and then we discussed it together, because there were a lot of contexts I didn't understand. Like there were a lot talking about Abrex. It's like a Chechen honor concept. I have no idea about it, and so we have had to analyze this stuff together. And the focus was in the comments, the people who took position against those murderer, those terror attacks. So this was our focus, and we analyzed all those comments, and then we made alternative narratives, content with alternative narratives about it, and this really worked. It worked so good that our content that we built about what we read there was shared from this Instagram page again. Even though the content was totally different, like it was pretty progressive content, and yeah, killing people is not very progressive, to say it. So it really worked to get into it, but it only worked because we worked together with people from the Chechen community, with youngsters, and with quitters from the jihadist scene. Me as a white Austrian guy, I can't do it on myself. It doesn't work. So I think this is my main point on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabian. So the importance of ownership, I guess, for young people in these projects as well. So I think it's something that most projects are trying to do nowadays, to involve also youth in them, although to more or less extent. I think you guys are working very intensively with young people. So since we're here, I'm going to continue and introduce you briefly, although I think you're quite well known already in our community. So Fabian is a street worker and has, I think, several hats. He's working for Boya, which is the umbrella youth organization in Austria, but also he works for the extremism counseling service, also at the NGO called Turn. And as he was also mentioning, was involved in a number of projects working directly with the youth, also formers who they themselves created most of the content of these campaigns. You also co-authored a book recently about Islamist radicalization in Austria, so check the book. It's called Die Wütenden, The Angry Ones. It's on Amazon, I guess, yeah, can be ordered anytime. So with this, I would like to invite you to present us about 5 minutes. I think you mentioned an instance of working on an intervention with young people. And I think it was a Putin-related topic, so very, very current. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I have to add one thing. My English is very bad. I stopped practicing English when I dropped out school. A big mistake. Please, everyone who's younger, always talk what you learned in school, because you will forget it. But we will make it. As you told already, I work for the Extremist Information Center, and my main focus is the exit work. So I work with youngsters, most of them of the jihadist scene in Vienna. I put you some links now in the chat, like to the project. This program called Jamal Al-Khatib, Mein Weg, is a project where we make content with young quitters of the jihadist scene in Vienna. So they would say we make anti-ISIS propaganda, but we really changed as the extremist propaganda changed. Like at the beginning, there were the big propaganda blockbuster from ISIS were our focus, like No Respite and all those stuff. But when like ISIS got smaller and Salafi or Hizb ut-Tahrir movement got bigger, as we heard also in the first what's it called?
Presentation.
Yes, sorry, my English, I told you. And right now we try to focus what are the topics behind all those content. So for instance, I told you about the situation of Samuel Paty, the murderer. It was Chechen guy. So we made a campaign about Chechnya. Like we tried to find, and this was very hard, good role models, women and men, out of the Chechen community, and made interviews with them for youngsters. So we asked them questions interesting for youngsters. The youngster in the project, they made the interviews, and we just made the whole concept, and it really worked. As I told you, this campaign got viral, and also the page who shared the murder of Samuel Paty, they also shared us. So this is pretty exciting, I think. The second project I want to tell you about shortly is called Pro and Contra. It's a little bit different. It's all about context, Turkish ultranationalism. Sorry, Turkish ultranationalism. We had like also 2020, we had in the 10th district of Vienna, pretty big district, we had like clashes. Turkish ultra-nationalists attacked a Kurdish demonstration for women's rights. And we found youngsters who were there and were also attacking, but there were no gray wolves, no organized gray wolves. They got it on WhatsApp, come to this, and there is action. And so they went there. And so we tried to make a different like content, a different narrative to this narrative from the extremist, but also from the Austrian, let's say, government, but also media, public media, because they all described it as it was a clashes between foreigners. So, but this is too simple. In our opinion and the opinion of the youngsters, big topic behind all this is marginalized masculinity. And so we focused now, this year we're starting with the second season about violence against women and girls and femicides. We have a big problem in Austria with femicides. It's really disgusting that our government doesn't do anything about it. So the youngsters want to make something against it. So this is more the secondary, primary prevention. Even Jamal, we were more on the third prevention topic. And the last thing I want to share is thank you for mentioning my book. We also made like an Instagram page for the book. 1 second. An Instagram page for the book, and in the book is there are the biographies of youngsters I worked with the last 10 years. It's their story, but also my story. It's our work we did together, the exit from the jihadist scene, and a lot of them were like Werner approached already, like were young Chechens, And so right now, with the starting the Ukraine war, the topic got very big again, because right now Russia is forcing young men in Chechnya and Dagestan to go to war. It's pretty disgusting what Kadyrov and Putin are doing. But then good thing about it, there were some protests in Chechnya, and like starting in Chechnya, there were mothers protesting their son have to go to Ukraine. And this thing got pretty big, and no media noticed it until yesterday. Yesterday there was a big article in the ORF, but we made an article last week. So we tried to make a lot of content about those demonstrations against Kadyrov, against Putin, and we got viral with it because nobody else talked about it. So it really works to look at the topics that are behind the radicalizations, like the anger about the Kadyrov regime, and make content about it, but progressive content. No, we don't have to make a caliphate to win against Kadyrov. We have to be all together and be in solidarity with those protest movements there. And this works pretty well. Last sentence, sorry. I think the biggest problem of our time, and also why the meme game is so good, is the black-white discourses. It's not only from populist movement, it's also from all the governments we have. I think in UK you have even worse government than ours. I think, yeah, it's pretty pretty difficult to say, but we saw it in the Corona time, that everything is black and white. If you yeah, and this is always conducive to radicalization. So our work, our online work, is to approach is to go into the gray zones and find content, or make content, create content that is progressive.
Thank you so much for this very authentic view from the street. I think we need it every now and then. I wanted to ask in the panel, because it's something that I think we haven't really talked about at all, and it's something that, especially if you look at your projects, it comes up very often. Starting with the needle in the haystack that Jakob mentions, how do you find the relevant content? There are certain tools that have been developed to analyze online content, to extract extremist content. So basically, to code, to well, first of all, to crawl various platforms, and then to analyze them. What do you guys think about these tools? Are they any good? Does it make sense to use them? Any practical use apart from research?
I'm pretty I'm critical against all those tools. So and my opinion.
We have a controversial conversation now.
Yeah, like I have for instance, like my work offline is a lot of to go with youngsters to the security stuff, like police or Verfassungsschutz.
Protection of the Constitution.
Yeah, like even youngsters who are listed as dangerous, so as dangerous, and the questions they ask, the lists they have, it's really stupid. Sorry, I have to say. They ask, how often do you pray? For instance, this is one question out of this tool. Like, if you ask a youngster how often to pray, you can maybe find out how religious he is, but not how dangerous he is. So I think the problem with all those tools is that they are very dangerous, because who says what is dangerous, what is radical, what is I think if the security stuff does this is a big problem for me as a social worker.
Yeah, so this is, I guess this is a risk assessment tool that they use. Yeah, exactly. So but there are also other tools to basically filter down out of the huge amount of online content, to filter down what might be extremist content, and that also has its issues. But what do you guys think about those tools, Ashton, Jakob?
Yeah, no, I also just wanted to draw the distinction between kind of risk assessment tools that are used to assess the likelihood that someone's gonna end up in committing acts of violent extremism, and then kind of just research tools which give you data access to some extent. I mean, some of the most prominent, I guess, like CrowdTangle, I mean, they have the limitations often. That there's a mix of kind of like commercial tools that are often very intransparent. There's platform provided tools where you're often not quite sure what they exactly give you. And also in the case of CrowdTangle, whether or not they'll remove access to researchers entirely soon. So you're also kind of dependent on the platforms. Then there's other tools that I think are a little bit sort of like better or more comprehensive, but it always depends, like what platforms do they give you access to, what kind of areas or types of messages within a platform. And so it is a bit of a patchwork. I mean, we always try to integrate, we try to do cross-platform analysis, because obviously people don't just use one platform, don't just have one account. They don't just exclusively live all of their online life on I don't know, Twitter or Instagram, but probably, you know, migrate between them and use them simultaneously. But it is often incredibly difficult to make cross-platform comparison, because the structure of the data is different, the accessibility of the data, both in terms of time as well as in terms of the nature. And you're often quite restricted, and I mean, there's people working on this, but you're often, of course, restricted to analyzing text as well, certainly when you're doing it at a large scale. And images and videos and sounds, of course, are absolutely critical to what's going on in the digital sphere, and that's much harder to do at scale, even though there are people, of course, working on coming up with solutions.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's interesting actually hearing what Fabian says, and this isn't necessarily related to extremism, but in the UK we have this thing called the gang matrix that was set up by Boris Johnson under David Cameron following the 2011 riots, if anyone remembers them in the UK. And basically everyone that was black was a violent gang member, and everyone that was white was on a moral holiday, right? So in this matrix, which they share with over 300, so if you make it onto this gang matrix, so suspicion you might be in a gang, they share this information with over 300 different organizations, including like the DVLA, healthcare, education. And I think, I can't remember the exact statistics, but about 70% of the people on there are black. And in criminology, there was very much a focus towards, this is all going back to like post-colonial policing and things. There was a focus that black people are gang members and white people are part of youth subcultures. So there's this huge like differentiation between who is in a gang. That's not like key to the question, but yeah, I use a software called Sherlock, which is an OSINT tool. So essentially you can put someone's information in. I do it by username, but you can do email address or full name. And then it basically pulls wherever they are on every platform together into a list with hyperlinks so that you can just find them really quickly, which is the one that I use. But that I'm not like an OSINT specialist, but that I do find that quite helpful.
All right, we have a question from the audience. So I'm going to just address it in the round. So whoever wants to reply, we can also have more than one. I think it's a very important question. How can we avoid stigmatizing communities that are considered as being at risk of radicalization? I think the topic was a little, yeah, Werner, go ahead, please.
I mean, that fits, the question fits to the example I had given beforehand. So as I said, there was, I mean, Fabian mentioned it, it was the Chechen community that was seen as extremely vulnerable, being at risk of radicalization. And our advice to those who wanted to organize something on that was basically not to get into it with we would like to offer workshops on countering radicalization in your community, because that would not have succeeded at all from our point of view. But because it's a migrant community in Vienna, we said, okay, why don't you offer workshops on very broad, how is life as a migrant Chechen in Austria? What are the positive and negative parts? What are you missing here? How can we support it? And that's an entrance door, because it has to be something that's in the need of the person. That's basically youth work. It's on a voluntary base. If you do not fit with any needs of the persons that you are working with, then the person won't work with you. That's it. And it's over. So you need to find something that is in the need of the person or of the community, so as they see you as a support for them. And that's the entrance door. And through that, you can go on with all the relationship and trust thing I mentioned. Sounds easy, sometimes even is easy, but a lot of times challenging to find the right entrance door.
And I think the key is, Werner, thank you. I'm totally your opinion. The key is to don't make projects, or don't make it top down, but do it bottom up and ask them what are the problems. What do you think? Not to come with fixed workshop concepts. This doesn't work neither. You have to go talk to them, be interested. Tomorrow, for instance, I go with youngsters in a Chechen mosque in the 10th district, because there are always rounds where they talk against ISIS, and I go with them and listening to them. And the thing is, we have to do it, because we can't solve the problem without them. Like yes. For ISIS, it's totally, they don't care about me as a white non-Muslim, what I say, what I think, but the youngsters I work with, they are dangerous to ISIS if they take position against them. And so the key thing, in my opinion, is to empower youngsters to take position against extremist narratives. And this works only if you give them resources, give them support, help them. And on a political level, if we would end up poverty, like you mentioned, the riots 2011, I think this was no extremist movement. The people were angry because they are poor and they are right. So we also have to make political decisions, and this is, I think, that the biggest problem. Like we have the big jihadi movement since 2014. It won't stop if the problems are unsolved, and I think this is the problem. We need political Lösungen, solutions.
Yeah. I just wanted to encourage also other members of the audience to ask questions. Just building up on this, I mean, since you mentioned politics, how do you deal in your work, in your practical work, both of you, with the situation we have now of increased far-right influence also in the mainstream politics? You have all these discourses which are xenophobic, which are anti-Muslims. I suppose you feel the effects of this also in your work. How do you deal with this?
I think I wouldn't see some. I mean, the big topic for young, or one of the topic for the big topic for young people in recent times was not at all connected. I would like to limit it to those young people we are working with, because that's not the youth or the young people of Vienna. It's still a segment of those, but of course for young people, the pandemic and all that was connected with that was one of the big topics, because they were, at least they felt, and to a certain extent, to my opinion, they were right on that. They felt as one of the most affected groups, like people, for example, people still were allowed to go to work at certain points, but young people still were not, at least in Austria. were not allowed to go to school. So the daily routine for them for almost 2 years was not there, or not school in a way they were used to do. So that was a big, or that big topic of the last 2 years, and that was covering up everything else. So some, like, I mean, we had the attack in the one terror attack we recently had in Vienna was 2020 in November, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. It was on the day before the winter lockdown of 20 to 21. And there were two surprises. One was positive, or maybe both were positive, I don't know. To start with the second one, like 2 or 3 weeks after the attack, it was totally not a topic anymore. So the advantage was somehow that there was no stereotyping on like you see the Muslims or the Macedonians or Albanians, considering the background of the perpetrator. So for the vast majority of young people, it wasn't a topic anymore because they had other things to talk about. And one positive observation on that, and that's actually connected to online, therefore I had the idea to mention it, and it fits now, was that we observed in the night and in the 1 or 2 days after the attack, a very interesting, even kind of phenomenon. I wouldn't have expected that beforehand. Several bystanders did movies, and a lot of those small mobile phone movies were online quite soon, within hours, as usual. But what we observed on the platforms, that almost all the youngsters went with that when they saw that somebody shared the movie, they immediately were going afterwards, kind of, the person said, no, you shall not do that. Like police said, we should not do that. We should rather hand it in to police because they could need it. So like the police, they got thousands of files sent in to the website they provided. Basically, it was 4 or 5 movies, and every of these movies they got several thousand times. And our main observation of the young people was that they did stop sharing those things together among each other immediately, and they went with the positive thing not to share this content. Of course, some people did that, and this is not a 100%. But with those we were connected, like on Instagram, as I said, they did not. And that was kind of even a surprise for us, that worked like this. And that for us was a success. For one more important thing that would be important for me at least to mention as one of a prevention tool, specifically when it's online, and that's media literacy and the education for that. So I appreciate every toolbox on media literacy for youth workers, and furthermore, informal education at school. Now, in the last years, I have more and more the impression that there is something working positively. And going back to your question with the increasing number of people in the more or less going into more or less far right propaganda or taking that. I mean, that came up here, at least here in the last 2 years, mainly in connection with the anti-COVID demonstrations. And if you looked at those demonstrations, then you saw that it's rather not young people involved in that. I mean, there were young people involved in that for sure, of course. Like the whole identitarian movement was heavily involved in that. But when you talk about the whole identitarian movement, you also could kind of almost easily, talking about quantification, how many they are. I mean, they did, from their point of view, a good job in misusing all those things. I mean, but I'm still one of those who says on the biggest demonstrations we had with 30, 40,000 people on a Saturday in Vienna, this was not a far-right demonstration. A lot of far-rights were involved in that. They like it when it was every Saturday, you saw like in the front line of the demonstration, it was always the identitarian movement marching to the front, giving the picture that all the 40,000 behind them were part of them, what was not the case. And as you immediately saw when all the restrictions were lifted, like from 1 week to the other, when we had those demonstrations weekly, and from 1 week to the other, it was gone. And in February, from one day to another, it shifted to an anti-Ukraine, pro-Putin thing, but it also shifted from several thousands to 500. That was also an advantage from my point of view, both by numbers, not yet by quality of the demonstration, actually. But there are some positive things to say on that. And so, though the discussions the public discussions often are going into the direction you mentioned, my impression is there's a lot of unsecureness on the situation, and everything goes to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, but a lot of young people, of course, I mean, we are living in a time where a lot of things are not secure for the future economically and even for concerning personal safety, and that's something that's quite clear, but it's not yet, at least here. I can only talking about the local system. My impression is it's not yet leading into some strengthening extremism or radicalization. But the risk that something is going into the direction is there. That's for sure.
Yeah, if I can add something, what Werner told, I think the biggest demonstration were really 100,000 people, like I was there, but was very big. And we in the Extremism Information Center, we really monitored this topic, and we also had all our cases. We wrote down and then we analyzed it. And the most interesting thing for me was that the biggest peaks when they called us for help, like families of radicalized people, was when there were made like really stupid political laws, and when politicians really said stupid things, like you know, the Schallenberg interview with like this was black-white narrative in perfection. So then everyone, like the protests got big because said, okay, if everyone who is critical against the how's it called, the Impfung,
the vaccine.
The vaccine, thank you, is a Nazi, then it's okay for us, and then we are Nazis. Like, this was the talking about them, and this is the big problem, I think, with those black-white discourses. And I think that the most important thing for us as social worker, but I think also for all people who deal with those extremist topics, is like we really have to make make position ourselves against those things, those black-white discourses, because they are the biggest problem for that. We wouldn't have like those demonstrations if politicians would think about what they say, and not to make like speeches where they say we lock you all in if you don't get the vaccine. Like, this is really stupid. For myself, to come to your question, Daniela, I'm a big fan of Paulo Freire. I don't know if someone knows it, and his pedagogic paradigm was action and reflection. So I think it's not enough to just talk with youngsters about those things. You have to do something, and this is what our approach is. Like, we make videos, we make demonstrations, we go to demonstrations, we make projects, we help people who have problems, and we do it all together. And I think this is the only thing what works to show solidarity and do something.
All right, well, I guess wrapping up as we are approaching the end of our event today, I just wanted to ask you for 1 to 2 sentences each or something relating back to our project. So just to remind you, we have these 2 repositories. One is containing more scientific information on right-wing extremism, Islamist extremism, and also gaming. But it is obviously in German and focuses more on Austria and Germany. We also have a repository hosted by Boya that contains these practical tools for youth workers, and there is also a training handbook that shows you how to use them. Now, my question for you is, what is missing? So we're obviously considering expanding the 2 of them, and the question is, what do you think is now even current or something that would be really, really important to add to these? Something we obviously don't have is left-wing extremism. So some of the partners suggested that we should also add that. But there might be also other niche topics that you think, would be important for them to be there. We approach the more general issues as, what is Salafism, what is jihadism? What does the scene look like? What kind of types of groups do you have, for example, in the right-wing extremism? So it's kind of basic information, and we would like to expand this a little bit. So maybe just in the order of appearance, starting with Jakob, Ashton, Werner, and Fabian, just 1 to 2 sentences, very brief.
It feels like you're already covering quite a lot of stuff, and I, of course, don't quite know what your sort of strategic priorities in this area are. I think, I mean, is this already just this kind of stuff covered, which is now in Germany being called like the anti-government extremism, essentially, which is a slightly tricky term, but I mean it's meant to be in connection with conspiracy theories that not just delegitimize specific government or specific government policies, which is of course perfectly fine, but which are essentially presenting the government as essentially hijacked and kidnapped by illegitimate powers, often connected to anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, though not explicitly generally. And so this is, I mean, something that we've seen quite a lot, of course, in the context of the anti-lockdown protests, even though I wouldn't say this is necessarily all of them were part of this emerging movement, but it's a fairly important trend, and it overlaps with the far right, but it's not quite the far right. And I think that's sort of going to be one of the big trends over the next few years, because there'll be some people for whom it was just about COVID, but there'll be other people who've adopted this kind of conspiracy mentality now, and who will find new topics and who will use the connections and the kind of mobilizations that have happened over the past few years and apply it on new grievances. I noticed that was much more than 2 sentences, but I think this would be some of my priorities over the next few years.
No, thanks. I mean, we do have something on conspiracy theories as such, but I think what we need to add is indeed a mapping of that particular scene, and maybe even package it or label it like this to make it more visible, it's graspable as well. All right, Ashton.
I agree with Jakob. Just firstly, I think anti-government extremism is going to be a potentially huge issue, particularly as we enter a delightful recession and more cost of living crises. Personally, for me, I would like to see a database that covers the imagery pushed out by anti-Semitism on the left. So I've looked at a lot of images, like the idea is that the trope of Jewish people being so in power and so in control can't be part of the oppressed. Certainly in the UK, they're left out of definitions of who oppressed groups might be facing racism. So maybe something on that. And also, going back to what you said about conspiracy theories, I have never seen anything like neat apart from insane diagrams, but some sort of like database that tells you what is going on within QAnon and like the conspiracy theories that link to governments, different countries, things like that. So there are my 2 suggestions.
All right, thank you so much. Werner, what is your wish list?
Yeah, my main wish list, but that's not about tools, because I think there are a lot of, as I said, is media literacy and continue working on that. But there are tools, and I think we have a lot of tools on that already. It's just about the promotion of those then. But for the wish list, I think the most promising is a wrong word for that. But the most important topic is, I would jump into what Jakob said on the overlapping, and like us and those mapping of the of topic overlapping on, as Jakob did in his presentation actually also today, so that certain topics are used by totally different styles or types of extremists, and what partly leads to real absurdities. And I think this is something you could even use as a tool in countering, by pointing out to which extent certain extremist groups are on the same track in certain topics. And one other word, which is its own topic for itself, but along this topic you could work specifically on the overlaps, and that's gender. Like I always said for years, like that if you look at the approach on gender that Salafi extremists and far-right extremists have, I don't see a lot of differences among them on this topic. And that's something that could be explored more, and even maybe with some practical tools to point this out to people that are going into that. How similar they are on certain topics.
All right.
Yeah, and maybe just add how similar our governments or like we say dominant societies are with this. Like patriarchy is a worldwide problem and is very problematic. I think the term anti-government extremism is also very problematic, because governments are part of this problem, like Boris Johnson or Sebastian Kurz, are all dominant society structures who deal with patriarchy or neoliberalism. It's part of the problem. So if you would call the term anti-government extremist, I would be in this group also, I think. So I think this is very problematic. What my wish list is, if you conduct interviews with young people, please give them an allowance, because it's pretty work to talk about their own biography and stuff like this. And I think the last 10 years, like so many interviews youngsters gave, please give them some money for it.
We did. There were some vouchers involved when we interviewed the young people in the project. So
I think this is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you very much also for the resource, Jakob. We'll definitely make sure to include it. I think I haven't mentioned, but of course the website also has links to materials that we consider particularly good for people if they want to deepen their knowledge. And some of them are in English as well. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Thank you, all of you. It has been amazing to listen to all this knowledge and expertise and experience. The project is going to benefit very much from this. I also want to thank the audience for being here with us, knowing that, again, September is an extremely busy month. We will make sure to also put this meeting online for more people to be able to watch it. And with this, I close our event and wish you a nice evening. And please keep in touch. We will make sure to update you on what we're going to do with these websites. They're not going to die. So it's just another phase. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.